There was a finger in his trash can. Story time. So I used to house sit for this really rich guy, and we're gonna name him Daniel. Now, Daniel's house was huge. It was basically a mansion. And the cool thing about house sitting for Daniel is that he let me do whatever I wanted to do. He let me use his car, invite friends over, have a party. Literally whatever I wanted to do, I could do it. But the only thing I was not allowed to do was go in his basement. And I really didn't think too much about it because he told me that's where his office was, so I figured he just didn't want anybody messing it up. Until the last time I house sat for him, I got a little bit nosy and I went down into the basement. Now the basement was huge. Literally my entire house could fit in his basement. And one thing caught my eye. There was a huge metal trash can in the corner of the basement. And it was kind of creepy. So unfortunately, I walk over to it, I open up the lid, and I look inside, and the first thing I see right on top is a human finger.
Storytime about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So a little background information. My parents and I moved into a new house that was literally 5 minutes from where I used to live. But I went to private school, and almost all the other kids in my town went to the public school. So I didn't really know a lot of the kids in my town. Well, a week after we moved in, our neighbors across the street invited us to a barbecue. While we were there, I started talking to our neighbor's older son, and him and I started to get along really well. Their older son was a senior, I was a sophomore, and their younger son was a freshman. Well, I kind of talked to the younger son, but he was just like giving me really weird vibes. So for the next few weeks, I started hanging out with their older son a lot, and we would talk all the time. Well, the one day whenever I went over their house, it was super weird. His younger brother kept saying, "Oh, I think I know you from somewhere. Like, I swear I know you." And I'm just like, okay. Well, the one morning I was waiting outside for my mom to pick me up because she worked night shifts and she would just grab me and then take me to my school. And I saw him in his window watching me like for part 2. Part 2 about the boy across the street who used to stalk me. So like I said, I saw him watching me outside his window, but I didn't want to overthink it, so I was just like, no, maybe he's looking at something else. Well, this all started a month after I moved in. Well, it started happening more frequently, so then I told his older brother. We're just going to call the younger brother Mac. So he talked to Mac and then everything was fine for a week. Just a little information real quick. For the public school, the bus would arrive at 7:40. My private school started at 7 o'clock. So my mom would come and get me at 6:15 because my school was kind of far away. So like I said, it was a week later. Every morning that I would go outside to wait for my mom, Mac would be standing on his porch watching me. Oh, but it gets worse. So one night I was in my bedroom, right? I kept seeing something run past my window. My bedroom was on the first floor. So I told my dad about it and he put cameras outside. Well, Mac's older brother told me that Mac was always interested in my life. So I told his older brother that our cameras didn't work, like for part 3. Part 3 about the boy that lived across the street who used to stalk me. So like I said, I told his older brother that our cameras didn't work anymore, knowing that he would tell Mac. Because he had it in his head for some reason that Mac wasn't obsessed with me. And the reason why I told him our cameras didn't work was because Mac was watching while the cameras were being set up outside. And after that, everything stopped. Except he would still be outside every single morning on his porch watching me. So the one night while I'm sleeping, I wake up to some noise right outside my window. And my bed was on the same wall as the window, so I could see who was right outside my window, but they couldn't see me. Well, I look, and guess who it is? It's Mac trying to get inside of my window. So I quietly call my dad, and it's like 3 in the morning. So I tell my dad what's going on. So he goes outside and nobody's there. Well, the next day we check the cameras. Footage of him jerking off outside my window, trying to break into my room with a crowbar. Luckily, I was staying at a friend's that night. Taking pictures of me outside my window, so we showed his parents. Then we moved and they sent him to a mental hospital.
I'm convinced my neighbor is a serial killer. Story time. So I have this really creepy neighbor, and we always catch him doing these really weird things. Like, for instance, we saw him coming out of the woods late at night covered in dirt. He even got the police called on him once because he was peeking through our other neighbor's window. Like, the man is just really weird. So a couple nights ago, it had to be like 1 in the morning. My family was woken up by loud banging on the door. Now, we're all freaking out, so my dad goes to answer the door. But when he opens the door, my neighbor is standing there, and he was covered in what looked like blood. So my dad obviously questions him and he's like, "What do you want? Like, what are you doing here?" And my neighbor's like, "Oh, sorry, I thought your kids would be home alone. I just came to check on them." Well, my dad was not liking that answer, so he started arguing with the man. My mom ends up calling the police. When they got there, they couldn't even really arrest him because he didn't do anything wrong. And I was like, what about the blood?
This woman killed over 600 men with makeup and you won't believe how. And if you stay to the end, I'll give you a cookie. Giulia Tofana lived in Italy in the 17th century when women didn't have rights. She then developed her own poison and called it Aqua Tofana. It was colorless, tasteless, and it could kill a man in only 4 drops, leaving no trace at all. She sold it to women disguised as makeup so they could kill their husbands. This went on for decades until police discovered that she was one of the most successful poisoners in history. She was then executed by guillotine, and here's your cookie.
Story time about how my boyfriend and I got robbed for over $3,000. And I know someone's about to be like, $3,000 isn't even a lot of money. We were both teenagers and both saved up a year's worth of paychecks for this, so it was a lot of money to us. So my boyfriend and I were looking for a car that we could use for about a year or so, and we found this one guy on Facebook. And the car looked too good for the price that he was selling it at, but I got in contact, asked him if he would meet me somewhere, and then he started being super sketchy. He was like, well, I still have to do some work on it, so can you guys come to my house? So we drove an hour away to his place, and we pull up to this apartment, and we drive around a few times, and the car is nowhere to be seen. So he meets us outside, we go in his house, super nice, offered us drinks and everything, and then he goes, okay, can I have the money now? And we're like, well, we want to see the car. And he goes, you guys can see the car after you give me the money, I just don't want to get robbed. So we give him the money, and he goes to the back to count it, like for part 2. Part 2 on my boyfriend and I getting robbed. So like I said, we gave him the money and he said he had to go to the back to count it. So I look over at my boyfriend and he's shaking his head because we already knew what was going on at this point. And as soon as I hear footsteps, I turn my head and this guy is standing there with a gun pointed in between my boyfriend and I's heads and a baseball bat in the other hand. And then he goes, okay, you guys can get out of my house now. Before we leave his house, my boyfriend's like, bro, can I at least get the money back? And of course the guy says no. So then I called the cops. And my boyfriend didn't want me to call the cops because he was like, I want to handle it my own way. But I didn't care. That was money that we worked hard for. So I got on the phone with the police. We went down to the police station. We made our statements and everything like that. And then we go back like I think a week later. And they show us a picture and they're like, oh, is this him? Well, apparently this guy had a lot of gun charges and everything like that. So he went to jail and had to do community service like for part 3. Part 3 on my boyfriend and I getting robbed. So like I said, they said that he had a lot of gun charges and so he went to jail. And I think he was only in there for 6 months because apparently he was only a teenager. So after he got out, it was like time for him to start paying us back. And I was so happy that I didn't let my boyfriend handle it his own way. I feel like this was the best revenge or whatever. He had to spend that whole summer doing community service to pay us back. And it's not like a fine where you can just pay that money back. Like, you actually have to do community service for that money. Or I'm pretty sure that's what the cops told us. But the funniest thing is we actually saw him walking in the mall with his dad whenever we got one of the paychecks. Because we went shopping with it. And we were walking right behind him. And my boyfriend wanted to say something. And, I was like, no, we already got the money back. Like, let's not
do that.